Welcome to Raptors Weekly for the week of December the 22nd. The Raptors completed another 4-0 week. These are becoming quite the norm now, and I can really get used to it. And joining me is Matt Shantz, making his podcast debut at Raptors Republic. What's up, Matt?
Not much. How are you doing?
Not bad, man. Another week, another undefeated week for the Raptors. And I think a good place to start is just laughing at the Knicks in general. I think that always seems to be, something cozy to talk about. So let's. I'll give you first shot at laughing at the Knicks. What about the Knicks is the most laughable to you?
Oh, my favorite thing about the Knicks right now that just shows the drudgery of their ineptitude at the moment is that the fans are actually clamoring for Bargnani to come back. I've read that on a number of forums. The solution that they seem to think that Bargnani will solve their issues with the triangle, his shooting to stretch the floor, that he opens the lanes for them. And I just, after years of suffering through his mere presence with the Raptors, I just love that. I absolutely love seeing another team talk themselves into him again and again.
It's like almost like it was if you're left alone in a room for a long time, you start developing weird illusions, and your mental state might become deteriorated, and that's what Knicks fans have become at this point. Especially with Derek Fisher manning the sidelines, looking clueless, Phil Jackson in the stand just looking helpless, and basically Carmelo Anthony regretting his decision not to sign with the Bulls. It's just all coming together into this microcosm of absolute shit that the New York Knicks are right now, and it's fabulous, man.
It's absolutely fantastic, and as a fan of another team, it's a brilliant show to watch, and it gives me a lot of sick pleasure. And it's great. And Carmelo Anthony as well. That's another thing that I'm really enjoying about them at the moment. You know, him kind of slyly leaking the source right now through his friends or through whoever it is, saying that he might be open to a trade at some point. What a joke that guy is.
Yeah. It's like, did he not see this coming, that the Knicks are going to suck this year? Like, what did he see on this roster? Was it Jose Calderon that he said, this might be the year that that they might make a run? And I think the points being raised over the last couple of weeks is that this idea of not signing a 2-year contract to align with the CBA, it's almost like he got the raw end of a deal. When at the time when he signed it, it looked like a great deal, but now that you look in hindsight, it's like he should have done what LeBron did.
Oh, I think he actually did play it the way that he wanted to, interestingly enough. He got the max contract, so he got the 5-year max, a no-trade clause, and a 15% trade kicker. So even with the salary cap going up, he forces a trade elsewhere, and his salary goes up 15%. So he still gets the max contract. He gets to pick where he's going because of his no-trade clause, just like he did on his way out of Denver, kind of forcing a team's hand. And he gets all the money. So I think that he's played it the way he wants, but he's underestimated how poor the team would be at the general moment right now.
Yeah, I think he's got to waive the 15% trade kicker if he forces a trade. I think that's something the team can ask him to do, kind of like what they did with Garnett. Boston did, I think. So that might be the one good news the Knicks have on the horizon.
Yeah, the team can ask him to, but he doesn't have to accept that. But we'll see. But either way, it's just adds to the terrible nature of that team at the moment.
And the general Atlantic, for that matter. But let's talk about the Raptors. The 22-6. What are they, like 22-6 now? Yeah, 22-6 Raptors. 14-3 at home. They beat the Knicks rather comfortably. It was a game which mired in the whole 5-12 point advantage for the Raptors for the most part. But you kind of knew the Raptors were in control. And once again, I'll point to the bench here: 22 from Lou Williams, 21 from Vasquez. Lowry ended up playing 31 minutes, Ross 36, Amir Johnson 32. But really, you could have emptied your bench and still won this game.
Oh, yeah. The Raptors never, I think their biggest lead was 18, was it? But it never felt like the game was very close. I think it was Matt Moore of CBS who tweeted out early in the first quarter, it's a 7-point lead, but it feels like a lot more than that at the moment. No, it was never close despite it being within a few scores.
So notable performers of this, other than Greivis Vasquez off the bench, 9 for 13, 21 points. Well, what do you make of Vasquez? He's had an up and down year so far. I've always felt that he's doing just fine. It's just the type of player he is, the type of shooter he is. He will go through games where he's 2 for 9, and given his poor defense, he's going to look horrible at times. But overall, if you look at the sum of the season so far, more often than not, he's come off the bench and given the scoring that he's supposed to bring. Like, do you have any qualms with Vasquez per se?
I think some of his decision making it bothers me sometimes. There was one, I think it was his first 3-pointer of the game today against the Knicks. It was in transition. He just pulled up and just jacked a shot well in movement. He drained it, but I audibly yelled when he was lining up to take it. He could have dribbled in another 10 feet and had an easy mid-range, or even drawn a double team to kick it out to an open shooter. So some of his decision-making really bothers me, but for what he brings to the second unit, it's the cohesiveness that Dwayne Casey talked about. He wants to run 2 lineups, and it seems to be working. You can't really question the results, and yeah, so we might as well roll with it.
Yeah, it's just, I remember like when Jose Calderon was on the team, and people were mad at his defense, the fact that he didn't play any, or he used to clap his hands instead of like closing out. But at the same time, you accepted what he got on offense and said, yeah, you know what, that's part of the game. He doesn't play much defense, but he runs a solid pick and roll. He's a good offensive player, and you kind of accepted him. Like, I think I've moved on to that stage with Vasquez, where I've accepted his flaws for what they are, and I think that the good outweighs the bad. So I'm kind of okay with him.
As for a backup point guard, he's an exceptional fit for this team. You'll never find a backup point guard in the league who doesn't have exceptional flaws. That's just the matter of being a reserve. He led the league in assists a few years ago, and he's being asked to fill kind of a different role with the backup unit, to step in and be more of a take charge point guard. And his cockiness, his kind of bravado that he carries himself with, it allows him to do that. There's never a part of basketball that he doesn't think that he can do.
Yeah, he does have that. Like, he does have that cockiness. He does have that. He's got that little haircut going. Every time he scores, he looks back at the D a little bit. Glances at the bench. So he brings that element that you almost want almost everybody on your team to kind of have.
Yeah, even in at the end of the fourth quarter today, when the game was in hand, everything was set. He's out on the court. Lou Williams has the ball at the top of the key, and he's just kind of killing the last shot. And he just starts puffing out his jersey towards the crowd, and it's just that's who he is, and it kind of gives the team a lot of its character.
We talked about like the 2 lineups that Casey likes to run, and earlier in the year, especially on this podcast, Will and Andrew were quite critical of Dwayne Casey in terms of him running hockey lineups. They said, 5 guys out, 5 guys in. But over the last week, granted it's been somewhat mediocre opposition, he's starting a bench unit to start the fourth, and they've always built up a lead by the 7-minute mark. Like, it's become a hallmark of the Raptors that they go to the bench to start the fourth or to at some point in the second quarter, and they get positive results out of them. Do you have any issues with this unorthodox 5 out, 5 in lineup?
Issues? Initially I did to start the season. I've kind of settled into it, kind of like you have with Vasquez, of acknowledging the weaknesses and just kind of moving on with it. I worry about playoffs just because lineups tighten up and they won't be playing the same inferior competition. The teams that we played this week were just terrible, and it does inflate the numbers of our bench. It allows them to look far better than they actually are. But in reality, the Raptors have one of the deeper teams in the league at the moment, which is something, as a longtime suffering Raptors fan, is a very strange thing to say, but it's pretty satisfying.
Well, but before the Knicks, it was the Pistons on Friday night, and this was one of those games where Elite Sports Stores organized a bus which took a whole bunch of Raptor fans from Toronto to Detroit, and they filled up the building. They made a lot of noise, just like Cleveland. They were louder than the home fans, and it was great. And the Raptors actually showed up and gave them a strong performance and beat the Pistons 110-100. A come from behind game. For the majority of this game, the Raptors were trailing, but a strong second half led by Lowry and Valanciunas, especially in the third quarter, pulled them through. But let's talk about James Johnson here. Like he threw down what can be described just a venomous dunk on Andre Drummond on the baseline. What was your immediate reaction when that hammer went down?
Oh, I let out a yell. It was incredible. My jaw dropped, and I was elated doesn't even begin to describe what I was feeling at that moment. I was just so jacked. But my favorite part was his quote at the end of the game. I cocked that joint back and I jammed it home on him or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It was just beautiful, beautiful.
And he followed that up with a very mature quote, something you don't expect from a guy who has neck tattoos. He basically goes, there's no hard feelings at all against Drummond, referring to the flagrant 1 foul that he administered on Johnson. That when you're losing, you get frustrated, and there's no hard feelings. I totally understand the feeling, and that's really that's a mature quote from a guy.
It's pretty shocking, and I really don't understand Drummond getting into it with James Johnson. One of my lifetime rules is never mess with somebody with a neck tattoo. I just don't think Drummond knew what he was doing in that moment. If the refs weren't there, Johnson would have killed him, and it would have been fun to watch.
What do you think of the call, the flagrant 1? I honestly can't tell. I know what the wording says about the flagrant 1 and 2, but I looked at that foul. He hit him pretty hard, and it was extremely intentional and completely out of context of the play. It's not like he was going for the ball or blocking a shot or cutting a path to the rim. It was malicious, and it got a flagrant 1, which and look, compare that to the foul Dalembert on who did Dalembert foul? JV Valanciunas, and that was given a flagrant 2. It didn't quite add up for me.
Yeah, I really struggle with the flagrant 1 and flagrant 2. I think the refs tend to give out the flagrant 2 when it's a headshot. Anything bodied, I don't think I've seen it called as a flagrant 2, and maybe you have, but that seems to be the line that they tend to draw. So JV was given a forearm by Dalembert to the face, so it's the flagrant 2. With James Johnson and Andre Drummond, it was a body issue, so it's more of the flagrant 1.
So back to the Detroit game, sometimes you have a quarter of your life, or the quarter of the season, in case of Jonas Valanciunas. In that third quarter, he was superb. Blocking shots, running the pick and roll, rebounding. Like he was the center that we all kind of expect him to be at the start of the season. And I wrote in my post game report for that game that maybe Valanciunas needs some growth time. I think Tim Chisholm made this point a while back in one of his pieces as well, that maybe the Raptors became too good too fast for JV, and that he's never got that chance of just going out there, mucking around, making mistakes. Like, he's been thrust into a very responsible role very early in his career, and sometimes I feel he struggles with that, but certainly not in this third quarter against Detroit, where he just dominated everybody, and even brought up the Mutombo finger wag.
Wasn't that just the peak of his arrogance at that moment? I loved it. It was he tends to get up for particular centers that I don't know what it is. We've seen it be against Enes Kanter with Utah, that he tends to really get up for those games. There's a lot of history there. And I'm hoping Drummond is one of those guys as well. Maybe I don't know, maybe for him there's some history of the Raptors picking him over Drummond, not in the same draft, but by picking Ross instead of Drummond.
Right.
They were picking JV instead of Drummond.
Maybe.
So maybe there's something there, but that was a fantastic quarter for him. It showed what he can become, and we're getting glimpses of that. But I would fully agree with you. The Raptors aren't supposed to be where they are right now. They're a team built on luck at the moment. We lucked out with the Sacramento Kings trade last year, shipping Rudy Gay out, and everything has clicked since then. We were supposed to be in the lottery, and instead we're leading the Eastern Conference. And he's never had that opportunity. Same with Ross. They're two young guys who've been thrown out on what was initially a terrible team, and by very early on in their career, they're having to compete with the top teams in the league and are being expected to be a contender.
And I think the GM kind of realized that the two are getting a lot of, not criticism, but scrutiny. I think after every game, fans like to zero in on Ross and Valanciunas, especially if you read the quick reaction comments, which have become, well, quite theatric of late. And Ujiri's quote exactly regarding Jonas and Ross was, and I'll read it as soon as this page loads in front of me. I think it was designed mostly to take some heat off the guys, and this page is not loading. The site is not loading, man. What did he say? Why don't you just tell me what he said?
Well, he made similar comments a couple weeks ago of just saying that the Raptors are still in they're beyond the see what we have stage, but they're in the developing what we have stage. So taking that next step and seeing seeing where our players can be. So he's made comments a few times this year of saying, come on, please remember that these guys are, what are they, 22 and 23, respectively. And so these guys are, in theory, they would still be in university, if they were going for full degrees. And instead, they're professional basketball players and are trying to carry the top team in a conference, and compete against, well, I'm not the best in the world because we play against the Knicks today, but to compete against some of the best players in the world.
Oh, fantastic job, Matt, of filling the airtime while this page loads. But good news that it did load. So what he said was, awesome. On good teams, you're not going to see a big jump from a Terrence or a Jonas. They're not going to go from 12 points to 19 points a game. They're not going to jump from 22 to 26 years old in one season. When you're on a lottery team or on a team that's not so good, yeah, guys get a chance to score points and do those things. But we got role players. We have our main players. So these young players are going to take their time and grow the right way. We're going to give them the opportunity. We've said that from day one, and we'll see how that goes and then make an assessment. So he's taken some heat off Jonas and Ross, and rightfully so. It makes sense with what you just said too, because these guys have grown up a little too fast, and maybe fans have somewhat too high of expectations from them. And I'm guilty of that too, man. Sometimes I get emotional after a game, after a loss especially, and go, like, why the hell isn't Ross hitting that shot? It's wide open. It would have cut the lead to 1. But then you kind of step back and you go, man, this guy's like, 22, and he doesn't know anything yet.
Yeah, it's incredible. I wrote a piece a few weeks ago called "The Frustration of Terrence Ross," and it was me just kind of venting about why Terrence is my most frustrating Raptor to watch. I see his shooting motion. We saw it a few times today, both his stroke from long distance and also the way that he can attack the basket and just destroy it. And there's very few players that have that combination of fluidity and just explosive athleticism. And he has the potential to be that. And so when I see him line up those shots, it drives me nuts when he misses it, or even worse, when he passes it up. His whole demeanor changes, but once again, he's being asked to do a lot at a very young age. My one issue with Ujiri's comments today is he's saying that we expect too much of these players and they're still kind of in that development stage. And yet in a game against the Knicks where everything's, going smoothly for us, the game is never in hand, Valanciunas only saw 22 minutes of action. And if we are in that still developing these young players while competing, it's against teams like New York and Detroit and
Brooklyn. Devil's advocate, we are on a back-to-back tomorrow against the Bulls, which we'll talk about in a bit, so I'll forgive him.
That's true. So resting him for that. But it was nice to see Ross get 36 minutes today, and he responded. That shot at the end of the shot clock from the inbounds play beneath the basket, I think it was in the third quarter. Mm-hmm. Just beautiful movement to get into that position to begin with, and then also just to finish it off.
Yeah, so we certainly are in a forgiving mood, and a 6-game winning streak will do that to you, albeit against Indiana, New York, Orlando, Brooklyn, Detroit, New York. So it's a weaker opposition, but hey, win is a win. So let's briefly talk about the Brooklyn game before we take our first break. A 105-89 home blowout, I'd say, of the Nets. A lot of people thinking that this was revenge. Could you tell them why they're wrong?
Why is it revenge if Brooklyn sucks? We have nothing to prove against them. Yes, they knocked us out of the playoffs in a game that was in a 7-game series that was decided by 0 points. We were even split that entire 7 games, and we lost on a game-clinching basket that was blocked. That's as close as it can get, and really, they're awful right now. I was thinking about it this week when the new logo got released and all of the criticism coming out of Brooklyn. Brooklyn actually tweeted at the Raptors that our logo looks familiar to them. And it's just a shame because all of the off-court stuff, the 7-game series last year, it has the makings of such a nice rivalry. We're in the same division. It's just all built so well. But the Nets suck. They're just terrible, and for the foreseeable future, they're going to be that same way. They're saddled with ridiculous contracts. They have no first-round draft picks, and if they do, it's that they get the lesser of 2 draft picks with Boston or Atlanta. It's just they're going to be terrible for so many years.
And they might just trade Deron Williams.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're going to be even worse.
Yeah, they're trying to get worse. And we have absolutely nothing to prove to them.
All right, so I think that's enough Nets talk for that. There was one other game, the Magic, buddy. I'm not going to talk about the Magic because we play these guys every week and we beat them every week. And every time it's the same game. They stay close, but the Raptors always squeak out in the end. So good on the Magic for staying true and being competitive. But, man, you almost want them to win a game once in a while.
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah, but they're in a rebuilding year, so I don't feel too bad for them, and they're fun to watch. I find in the Magic game, the one thing that I do want to talk about is Kyle Lowry. He had that one move against, was it Oladipo that he crossed like 4 times before passing to Landry Fields for the 3.
That blew my mind. First off the dribble, and then when it landed in Landry's Fields, I was clenching my fists. I was dreading him lining it up, but he had to. He had to at that moment.
Yeah, I think it was one of those like Jordan on Iverson type crossovers where he crossed him once, he could have had him, but then he pulled back and crossed him again just for the hell of it.
Yeah.
I think that's it. That's it for the week's games. 4-0 week. It's going to get a lot tougher. We'll talk about that later. But in the next segment, we got to talk about this logo. All right, welcome back to part 2 of Raptors Weekly. We'll talk about the upcoming road trip, which scares the shit out of everybody. But before that, we'll talk about the new logo, which the Raptors unveiled. And funny thing happened on Twitter. Cahal Kelly, how do you say that?
I have no idea.
Yeah, he tweeted and he goes, here's the Drake-inspired new Raptors logo, and he pointed to the Raptors logo. And Drake actually responded and goes, actually, that's not really inspired by me. I had nothing to do with that. My logo, my collaboration with Mitchell and Ness comes out next year. And, the Twitter crowd actually took the opportunity to really razz Cahal Kelly for that one, trying to play off like he's got some sources or whatever. So it was quite fun. I like seeing people get humiliated on Twitter. It's fun to me.
Although you have to appreciate the global ambassador coming out with a "well, actually" statement, like just a perfect step in for him.
I liked it. I enjoyed it. The new logo. Okay, let's talk about this new logo. I'm looking at it right now, and I got the Brooklyn Nets logo in front of me, and they do look similar, man. They look awfully lot similar, especially with the black and white version of them.
Oh, man.
It's not plagiarism, but you definitely check the guy's homework.
Yeah. It's as close as you can get without it being a failing grade in school. Man, when the first black and white symbol came out yesterday, or on Saturday, whenever it was, the similarities were immediately drawn to. Even Brooklyn tweeted out at the Raptors a little bit later, something looks familiar, or something along those lines. And you can't not see the similarities of that moment. Now, Brooklyn typically takes their logo and puts it on a shield of some sorts. And so that changes things a little bit, but not enough.
Do you prefer this over the whole, the claw on its own look?
Oh, man, I'm really wrestling with it. When the first black and white came out, I really didn't like that. And then they came out, the Raptors tweeted out, like, now that we got your attention, and came out with a few different color schemes after that. So there's a gold, there's a silver, there's a red, and I'm missing one. Anyways, there was the 4 different colors, and now I'm just nervous. I'm really nervous that we're going to have some gold or silver jersey next year. Those colors are nice as a trim, but as a main color, I'm dreading it.
Yeah, I'm gonna wait and see, because generally I think that change, people don't really receive that really well. And whenever a new logo comes out, the first thing is like backlash that, we're fine with the way we are. But right now, I'm going to give it like a month to just seep in and see how I feel about it at the end of the month, and then kind of make a decision. But I don't necessarily like the whole claw meshing in with the basketball seams. It just looks a little tacky. But again, I'll give it a month. Right now, my review would be, if this was a quick reaction, it would be a C- at this point. But it might go up later. Who knows? What I do like is the font they used for Toronto Raptors. I think it's better than what they're currently using.
That's a sharp addition.
What's your logo grade right now? You're doing the quick reaction for the logo.
You did C-, you said?
Yeah.
I think I'd go a little bit above that. I'd probably go a C or C+, but it really depends on the color scheme moving forward. It wasn't given to any particular player, and I forget where I read this on Twitter. But somebody said a prominent Raptor afterwards said it was more important what the jerseys were like than the logo. And I'm with them on that. If the logo is ugly, you don't see it very often. Even on the Raptors' current jersey, it's just not as prominent. It's the jersey coloring. I've grown attached to the red and white, mainly the white home jerseys. So moving forward, we'll see what that looks like. But the logo itself, I'd probably give a C plus maybe. Mm-hmm. I'd give it higher if Brooklyn didn't have the same logo.
But let's get back to some basketball. Lou Williams, he actually hit a end of quarter shot this week against the Knicks, which is a change for him because he started off hitting everything, and then he went through a period where he hit nothing at the end of the quarter, and Casey unerringly just kept going back to him every time, and he kept missing. Mm-hmm. But I know that you've noticed something different he's doing towards the end now.
Yeah, well, not every time. It used to be that he did the exact same move every single time, and it worked. It worked for that couple-week period. There was one game where he hit 3 quarter-ending shots out of the 4 quarters, yeah. And so it was working for him. He's up at the top of the key. They do a full clear-out, and he does his one dribble to the right, fake, step back to the left, fade away, three-pointer. And they haven't done that every single time. They still do the clear-out typically. But today against the Knicks, he actually took his man to the hole and hit a little push floater, and drained it. And it was brilliant because obviously, the scouting report for the Knicks was, this is what Lou Williams does every single time. This is the Raptors' go-to quarter-ending move. And he fooled them. He did something completely different. In Detroit, it was the exact same thing. He was up at the top of the key. They did a little bit of a closeout, and he just winged it in down low to Hansbrough, who had a wide open layup. So they've done a little bit of a variation now that the scouting report's getting out, but it's still, Casey loves it a little bit too much.
Yeah, and he's the only Raptor I feel right now who has carte blanche, or Cate Blanchett, if you've seen 22 Jump Street. He has complete Cate Blanchett on what he wants to do with the ball when he gets it. I don't think anybody can fault him, or anybody turns him, hey man, don't fucking do that. When he takes a bad shot, a horrible shot, or a shot with 22 seconds on the clock, like he did today in transition. He seems to have that freedom that Casey's afforded him, right?
Yeah, because that's his one role. It's everybody else is more of a multifaceted player. Lowry, he just wouldn't take that shot. So it's not that he doesn't have the freedom. Casey doesn't give him the flexibility to do it. He just won't. He's a smarter player than that. But Lou Williams is just a gunner.
So let's talk about where the Raptors stand at the Atlantic Division. I think it was Will who tweeted from the main account that the Raptors could conceivably finish with more wins than the rest of the Atlantic combined. And it got me thinking that that's actually not possible because it's not. But it's funny to think about because the Atlantic is that bad.
I think it was Eric Kareen out of the National Post who replied to that saying, even if the Raptors won 58 games, the rest of the division would need to win 15 or less each.
I think just by the fact that they play each other, it's not possible to do that. But it's something interesting to think about. You could write a whole research paper on how that could happen. Maybe it can happen. Maybe that's the homework assignment for the listener to figure out what permutation or combination of wins needs to happen for the Raptors to actually finish with more wins than the rest of the Atlantic.
I mean, I think we're leaving out the possibility that Philadelphia could get annexed from the league somehow. That's always an option, but I don't think it's going to be possible, but it's going to be a lot closer than it should be.
But the Raptors will be the first team to actually clinch a playoff berth, I would think.
Oh, 100%. With Brooklyn now trying to ship out parts like Deron Williams and Joe Johnson, they've given up. Boston's given up with Rajon Rondo. Now, one or two of those teams might still make the playoffs. That just shows where the lower end of the East is. But nobody else in the East, in the Atlantic Division, is actually trying right now. They're actually doing quite the opposite. So I'd be shocked if the Raptors aren't the first team to win.
So before we take a break and talk about the schedule, I just want to touch on rebounding a little bit. That's one area where the Raptors having a 22-6 record, which is very impressive. First time they've had 20 wins before Christmas. They're still 25th in the league in defensive rebounding. And my observation is that it's very much a Golden State type gang rebound style that the Raptors are playing, where Lowry, DeRozan, they get in to get the rebounds. It's not necessarily just Amir Johnson and Valanciunas' responsibility. So far, it's worked out. But do you see any red flags so far with the way we're rebounding, or that you might be concerned with heading into the new year, especially on this road trip?
I'm terrified on this road trip. Our opponents are actually teams that attack the rim and attack the glass, trying to get those rebounds both on the offensive and defensive ends.
Why are the Raptors so poor at rebounding? Like, what are your observations here?
I think, one, we don't have anybody who's elite at it individually. Memphis has a guy like Marc Gasol who just absorbs the rebounds. Chicago has Noah and Pau Gasol who can attack it. Taj Gibson, who's just a brilliant rebounder in and of himself. So other teams have those specific players who that's part of their role set, that they are asked to do that specifically. Yeah. Toronto, as you said, is more of a rebounding by committee, and we tend to do a number of small ball lineups throughout the game as well, where we have 3 guards and 2 power forwards instead of a center in there as well. So we give up size, which hurts us, and it terrifies me in this upcoming road trip.
And certainly the offense has more than kind of made up for it. And right now the Raptors have the second ranked offense in the league, 114.5 offensive rating. Before it used to be well behind Dallas, about 4 or 5 points behind Dallas. But now they've kind of caught up. Dallas is at 115.7 and the Raptors are 114.5. So there's still 1.2 point difference between Dallas and Toronto, which says a lot. And that kind of masks a lot of the deficiencies we have on rebounding. But as you said, this road trip coming up, we'll definitely face some teams that are really big inside and will test us. So we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the massive road trip. All right, welcome back to the final part of Raptors Weekly. The Raptors are embarking on a 6-game road trip, which is going to be the toughest stretch of the season for them. And this week, they got 3 games. Chicago on Monday, the Clippers on Saturday. Notice a big break there for Christmas. And then it's a back-to-back against Denver on the Sunday. So Saturday and Sunday games. And then we got a Monday game to start off the week. The Monday game is against the Bulls. And Greivis Vasquez, in his post-game interview after the Knicks, described this as a playoff game. Do you agree with that?
I wouldn't go that far. It's a very important game. I was really tired of earlier on in the season when teams, when the media mainly, and even fans of other teams were saying that Toronto wasn't a legitimate team because even the better teams that we were winning were missing key players. And Chicago, it's looking like they will be. They might be missing Rose. I haven't heard any updates. He's out ill, but it is an important one. They give what they're good at. We aren't very good at in rebounding, so we'll see.
Yeah, and they've had a good run. They've beaten the Knicks. I'm just joking. No, they've beaten Portland. They've beaten Miami, who was struggling. They blew out Miami actually in Miami, and they lost to the Hawks this week. So they've won 5 of 6. They stand at 17-9, and this is a game that I look back to. I think the second game of the season, maybe the third, was against the Bulls at home, and we dropped that one. It kind of soured the early good record the Raptors have because the Bulls were one of the key contenders in the East, obviously, and they dropped that one. It kind of took the gloss out of the record at the time. Like, I really see this as a chance to make a statement. You know, the games we played this week, Detroit, Knicks, Brooklyn, yeah, you're supposed to win those. But this one is actually a game that if you win, the league takes notice, whereas if you beat the Pistons or Knicks, nobody really cares.
Yeah, the games that we won this last week, it was just kind of taking care of business. This is actually making a statement. As I already said, I wouldn't go as far as Vasquez in saying it's a playoff game, but it's an important one.
And for the Bulls, they're going to be missing Rose because he is ill, but Pau Gasol has been playing really well for them. Heinrich has been playing better. Jimmy Butler continues his strong play. Probably not going to have DeMar DeRozan back for this one, so we're not going to see a Butler v. DeRozan matchup, which always scares the shit out of me for some reason. So we're going to see a less ISO heavy Raptors offense and more maybe reliant on Kyle Lowry's creation rather than DeMar DeRozan versus a great defender like Butler.
Yeah, we'll need to have similar ball movement that we had to New York. It'll be obviously a different challenge because Chicago is so much better than New York. But looking at a couple updates out of the Chicago Tribune, Taj Gibson, Joakim Noah, both with ankle, and Pau Gasol with a chest injury, all are considered probable for tomorrow's game against the Raptors. So that could flip either way, and without one or two of those guys, that makes a huge difference as to what type of team we're playing.
What do you think of the job Thibodeau's done so far with this Bulls team?
As a fan, I like his coaching style. He's really intense. He gets in there and he's the most engaged coach in the league. He's just up and moving and yelling. I worry for his voice long term in his life. I think there'll be problems there. But I also worry about his players. We're seeing Deng looks far older now than he actually is in Miami. And I think part of that is his years spent with Thibodeau. He runs guys into the ground. Jimmy Butler, he's playing for a max contract right now, so he's probably loving that he gets to play 43 minutes a night or whatever absurd number it is. But man, if he does that for the next, let's say Chicago signs a new max contract, if he has to do that for the next 4 or 5 years, boy, is he going to age fast.
Like in terms of matchups, obviously the one that kind of sticks out for me is Noah versus Valanciunas. We saw him taking care of Drummond in that game, but this is a different proposition altogether. I would love to see JV just have a strong game. And by strong, I mean 10 points, 12 rebounds, 13 rebounds. Keep Noah to under 13 rebounds, something like that. Just have a strong game where you kind of hold your own against a top tier player. It would really go well for his confidence and everything. So that's the matchup that I'm going to focus on. And the other one that I look at, especially with Rose out, would be Lowry versus Heinrich. Heinrich is a good defender. Lowry will be forced to test his jumper against Heinrich because he can afford to lay off him and still defend the J. But those two matchups, kind of, I look at that and go, those might be the turning points here.
Yeah, those are definitely big. It'll also be Ross covering Jimmy Butler. I'm going to be watching that one really close to see how he bodies him up, how he stands against his man. Butler is having a monster season right now for Chicago and is a huge reason for their success at the moment without Rose. So I'm going to be watching Ross very closely.
So Butler's in his 4th year. Ross is in his 3rd. If you had to make a projection for Ross, a best case projection, would you say Jimmy Butler?
Oh, man. Not by year 4, at least.
No, not by year 4. I'm saying that makes you think, doesn't it? Eh?
Yeah.
Let's say year 6. Could he be a Butler type player, but except a better 3-point shooter, obviously?
I don't think he's as assertive as Butler. If he develops that assertive nature and a desire to really take control, yeah, he could be Butler in a few years, and that would just change the dynamics of this Raptors team incredibly. But Butler misses a shot, and his mentality is he's going to come back, he's going to shove it down your throat at the other end. Terrence Ross misses a shot, and he slumps his shoulders.
Except that he has the ability, you would think, to shove it down your throat if he really wanted to. So, I think the delta between the two isn't athleticism or skill. It's more just willingness to act a certain way. And Butler right now has that. Maybe that's a product of him having Thibodeau as a coach and Ross being more nurtured and taken care of by the organization, whereas Butler just go out there and you're a bull and just go do what you got to do.
And I wonder how much of that is character as well. We've seen a lot of guys come into the league and they have all the talent in the world, but they just don't use it. And I really don't want to compare Ross to Bargnani, and please don't take me as that's what I'm doing. But we kept hearing that with Bargnani as well, of just, you just have to be more assertive. He has all these abilities, and some of it is just character. And I'm wondering if Ross is more of a player who likes to defer and fulfill a role, rather than Butler even showed this offseason when he in October, when he turned down the extension and said, nope, I'm going for the max because that's who I am. There's an assertive edge to him that I haven't seen with Ross.
Yeah, good point. So prediction time. You go first.
Oh man. I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but I'm thinking Chicago takes it. They've rested for a few days, and I think that they're going to get the reserves back. And I'm really scared about Nikolai Mirotic. He's been a monster lately. He hit 6 of 6 for 3 and the other day, and stretch 4s hurt us badly. So I think we lose by 8.
Hey, is Terrence Ross closer to Tony Snell or Jimmy Butler?
Oh man, Tony Snell, but with minutes.
That's the same answer Somebody else gave me on the podcast too. I forget who right now, but it was the exact same, down to the wording. It was just, but with minutes. Yeah, I'm going to say a loss. The heart says win, but the mind says a loss. Just the back-to-back on the road. We were in a similar situation against Cleveland. We went to Cleveland, played a really good 3 quarters. In the fourth quarter, they got the calls at home, and they had LeBron James, obviously, and we ended up losing a close game. I say something like that transpires here as well, especially missing DeMar DeRozan. It's a huge blow in a game like this. So, unfortunately, the Raptors might enter the Christmas break with a loss. And it's a long Christmas break because they don't pick up till Saturday, December 27th, when they hit the road in the West Coast against the Clippers. The Clippers, man. You had a chance to catch some West Coast basketball this year?
I've watched a few games of theirs and tried to catch what I can, but I'm an early to bed guy, so I haven't watched as much as I'd like.
They had a 9-game winning streak in the middle of the season, where they really stepped up. They've lost, what is it, 3 of 6. They're 3-3 in their last 6. They beat Milwaukee 106-102. Close game. I actually saw that one. And DeAndre Jordan had a massive game in that, 16 rebounds. We talked about the Raptors' lack of rebounding, and this is probably a game where that'll come to the forefront because the Clippers do rebound really well, and we're going to be tested here.
Yeah, I hoping that we try to take advantage in the post. I still don't think that DeAndre Jordan is a good post defender. You're not going to back DeAndre down, but you can catch him in the pick and roll, I hope. JV showed, particularly in the third quarter against Detroit, that he can be that pick and roll big. And I'm hoping that we throw that at them a little bit and see what comes of it.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point because I noted this in the post-game report for the Detroit game as well, is that we started that game off by giving the first 4 out of, I'd say 10 possessions to JV. And he converted on one of them, and he turned the ball over on the other one, and took a bad shot on the third. But they were all possessions where he received the ball in a face-up or a post-up situations. Contrast that to the third quarter, where he never got a single ISO play, and it was always as part of a 2-man set in a pick and roll or a pick and pop, or something like that he was playing with another point guard, and he had much more success. And I think if we adopt that approach against the Clippers, you'd have a lot more success than traditionally just, hey, JV, you got DeAndre Jordan on you, go back him up and do your hook shot, because that's going to get blocked.
Yeah, the back him up till about the key, and then do your quick drive into the lane and throw up an awkward hook. It's not going to work.
Yeah, and quick is relative there too.
Yeah, quick is a very relative term. But when JV is being used in the pick and roll and we're actually feeding him, it, one, makes him push a little bit harder, I think, and drive that lane quicker. He's got good hands in the pick and roll. But two, it opens up a lot of lanes for further movement to find the open man. And Chris Paul's a crafty defender in the pick and roll. I think that he'll do a good job in that. But I think that we can hopefully trap DeAndre and see what comes of it.
And Lowry versus Paul obviously is going to be a huge matchup here. 2 guys, 2 bulls, really, solidly built, play somewhat similar type of basketball. It's got to be fun to watch. And this is, Lowry's the type of guy that he's going to circle this on the calendar and go, this is a game where the spotlight's going to be on me, and I got to step up against the best point guard in the league, I think.
One thing I want to quick throw in there, something that I'm hoping for as well. The Clippers won't be on a back-to-back, but they are playing Christmas Day. They're playing the late game. Starts at 10:30 Eastern time, and then 2 days later they've got an afternoon game against us. So I'm hoping that it will be a little bit of a quicker turnaround for them, that there might be a little bit of a tired legs, because their game on Christmas is against Golden State, who's going to push them. And
then, prediction time for this one. I'll go first. I'd say a win. I'd say the Raptors have some time to think about this one. Lowry's not going to let the Raptors lose here. That's my take here.
I'm with you. I think that, and maybe this is me picking more with my heart, but I know that they're going to say this is one that's circle on the calendar and they want to make a point.
Yeah, and Blake Griffin, Amir Johnson, I'm not too worried about that. I think Johnson can he's been solid overall defensively. I think he has moments where he just looks really tired in some quarters, where he gets just simply run over and he can't jump. His heels never leave the floor, and he looks really bad. But if you look at his season overall, he's had another extremely good season, except that he has these stretches where he's just invisible for a quarter at a time or so.
And I'm hoping the 5-day Christmas break will kind of do him well with that he'll be a little bit more rested.
I'd say J.J. Redick versus Terrence Ross might be interesting here. if that's who he's guarding. Three-point shooter who makes you run around a lot of screens. Should be good exercise for Ross, who has been a little better of late fighting through screens. I think a couple of weeks ago, at the height of the Ross criticism, one of the things being levied against him was that he just doesn't fight through screens enough. But I think he's made it a point to actually doing that. And again, it's only the Knicks and Pistons. He looked really good in defensive chasing situations than he had earlier in the year.
Yeah, and something I'm curious about is whether Casey will give Ross any minutes against Chris Paul as well. He likes to do that, hide Lowry on the off ball, give him a little bit of a rest from guarding the heavier man. But with JJ Redick, that's also different. It's a little less standing around and a lot more chasing.
All right, trivia time. Which hated former Raptor is currently on the Clippers?
Oh, man. This is going to get me. Hated former Raptor currently on the Clippers.
Let me put it this way. Which unanimously hated former Raptor? You know how there's like some love for T-Max, some people hate him? No, not this guy. This guy was hated 100%.
Well, it won't be Matt Barnes because he never quite made it to the Raptors.
No, it can't.
It's Hedo Turkoglu.
There you go.
I always forget that he still exists in the league, that somehow he's holding on.
There you go.
But the Clippers brought him back for some reason. It just shows how bad their small forward position really is.
Well, Matt Barnes is starting, so that tells you something.
Yeah.
So we round off the week in Denver with the whole Mile High tough place to play, except it's not really a tough place to play because Denver isn't really that good this year. I'm surprised they haven't fired Brian Shaw yet. We beat them once already at the ACC. This is on a back-to-back on a Sunday, so talk to me about Denver, man, because I really don't want to talk about Denver. So I'll let you do it.
They're 12-15 right now, I think. Everything that could be going wrong for them is going wrong for them right now. Even today, Gallinari was announced that he had a meniscus tear that's going to require surgery, I believe. So he's out a few weeks at minimum. So it's just bad luck, bad coaching. I think Shaw is the wrong coach for them. He constantly tried to sell himself as a head coach by, triangle this, triangle that, and then you give him a fast break team in Denver. It makes no sense fit-wise, and it's showing in on-court production. Yeah,
just because you sat next to Phil Jackson for a few years doesn't mean you know the triangle.
No, it's or that you know how to implement it with the players you're given.
Or you read an article about it somewhere. My hope with Denver is this, that they have such a bad season that they want to blow it up and they trade us Mozgov. Because I think a guy like that could be really helpful for the Raptors. Because we are thin at the C. Hey, don't get me wrong, Chuck Hayes fans. He's good. But somebody like Mozgov, a good shot blocker, he had 5 blocks that day against Indiana. Granted, it's Indiana, but still 5 blocks. That's the type of guy we kind of need to clog that paint. So Denver, keep losing and blow it up and trade us Mozgov. And there's a connection there with Ujiri, so, you never know. You just never know.
Yeah, that's true. Although Ujiri, I don't believe that he's really loved by the ownership in Denver anymore. Mm-hmm. But we'll see. Mozgov would look really, really good. I think if they were to start shredding their team, he would have a lot of takers on the market, and it might require a first-round pick to go.
Yeah. So that's that. We'll talk about the other 3 games in the road trip in next week's pod. The way I'm looking at it, man, is the Raptors are 22-6. They've built themselves a nice enough cushion where, even if they lose all 6 games on this road trip, they're still in a decent position. So if they come back, say, 2-4 on this or 3-3, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm personally aiming for a 50% for a 500 record on this 6-game road trip. And if that happens, I'm ecstatic at that moment because their cushion does exist. And I'm just hoping to kind of get through this stretch without DeRozan.
All right. I think that kind of wraps it up. Matt, thanks for coming on, man. We hopefully will have a podcast next week. It's going to be aired on the 28th. Fingers crossed that people are available and we can pump out another Raptors Weekly for you. But if not, if in the odd case we're not available, we'll see you the week after. Bye-bye.